Well, good evening and welcome to the program. First tonight, when it comes to Pollie's punching the public credit card to wine, dine and travel, Bronwyn Bishop seems to be in a league of her own. But with all politicians, the public has a right to demand value for money. Now, our Minister for Sport and Tourism, Leon Bignell, has every reason to travel. But how does spending $170,000 in 1 year sound? Here's Hendrik Gout.
Are you formally challenging me to undertake a journey around the world in 80 days?
Around the world in 80 days seemed like a fanciful concept at the time. But times have changed.
She'll pay back $5,000 spent on her 15-minute chopper ride from Melbourne to Geelong.
We all accept that travel is just a part of doing business, except when it's not, and when we are paying the bill.
Frankly, I'm unhappy about it as well.
Sometimes our public figures forget about the figures they charge the public, and they need reminding that the government isn't a bank.
And the political consequences?
Like everyone who has done something like this, inevitably, for a period of time, they're on probation.
Bronwyn Bishop's excesses are, like her hairdo, clearly over the top, but she's just one of scores of peregrinacious Pollies, federal and state.
Struggling South Australian families who've been slugged with massive increases in ESL costs, facing the closure of the Repat Hospital, closure of emergency department services, are going to be very, very angry.
The Shadow Treasurer is talking about our globe-trotting sports, agriculture and tourism minister, the affable Leon Bignell.
Look, it's extraordinarily excessive, spending $170,000 a year on overseas travel.
They're portfolios for which travel is not only permitted, but expected and necessary. However, in these straitened times, these FOI records of this minister's outings might make you a little jealous. He began the last financial year by jetting off to Dubai, on to Frankfurt in Germany, then Edinburgh, Glasgow, London and back to Adelaide. The cost, over $30,000.
We accept the fact that ministers have to travel, but when you do, you've got to be mindful this is taxpayers' money that you're spending.
And, naturally, the minister didn't travel alone. He was accompanied by his tourism, food and wine advisor, Kerry Truell, one of many foreign and domestic expeditions with the minister. The Hollywood Palladium snapped with John Travolta on a $38,000 14-day USA trip in February. That's $2,700 a day, and you paid. After transiting through Dubai, the pair arrived at Frankfurt in Germany at lunchtime on the 25th, where his official appointments included tourism and trade staff, a tour of the town square with the deputy mayor, and a site visit to the Rheingau Music Festival. They checked in at the Hyatt on the River Rhine in the nearby town of Mainz, staying 2 nights for $1,400 and racking up a $500 limousine bill and a dinner bill before flying out 2 days later and landing in Edinburgh. As in Frankfurt, there were official engagements. In Edinburgh, that included a tour of the Scotch whisky experience. And we know that Bignell lodged here at the Radisson. There's a bill for room 119 on the 27th and 28th. And we know that they walked the Royal Mile. The documents show lunch for 2 here, the inn on the Mile. And dinner was here, where the wine was a cheeky little Argentinian Malbec. A snap at £55. This is a wine that he bought for $99 in Edinburgh. Do you think that that's a little excessive?
Certainly it is excessive expenditure, particularly when the meal was actually a meal between the minister and the ministerial staffer.
The cost of the Edinburgh stopover, $1,277, not counting airfares. And finally, they made it to Glasgow, where the publicly funded credit card is hit for $230 for booze and incidentals. And it's off to the stadium, and the main purpose of this work trip, to watch the Commonwealth Games, with a mind to an SA bid for the Games in 2026 or 2030.
Michael Shelley
Meanwhile, back in Adelaide is Ian Derbyshire, a former chief executive of the State Tourism Commission. These days he chairs a non-government regional tourism board. What does he think of the ministerial travel?
You should always be taking a look at your expenditure and seeing what value you did create out of it.
True. In 2014, as Bignell and co were globetrotting, SA was the only state to record a decrease in international visitors and the only state to record a fall in international visitor nights.
The tourism results are unfortunately down, so we need to just keep looking to make sure we're spending money in the right way, on the right things, and in an effective way to get the turnaround of the situation we see ourselves in.
Most of the private operators out there are doing it pretty tough.
Bob Ford, another former Tourism Commission boss, is in the tourism business himself.
There's a lot of operators out there that have got the houses on the line, they work hard and they make no money.
Meanwhile in Glasgow, the curtain fell on the festivities and it was time for the next leg of official appointments.
England swings like a pendulum do.
The Andaz Hotel. It made one list of the world's best properties to stay. When we checked last week, the rooms cost more than $900 a night. And here it is, on the ministerial credit cards, £970, over $2,000 at today's exchange rate. And for Tucker, the bill at this Soho restaurant, according to Kerry Trule's credit card, was $180.
Where the minister is travelling with his personal ministerial advisor and is having a meal, charging up to the taxpayers $100 bottles of red wine, the finest red wines that you can get from around the world, or when the minister, for example, in some other cases appears to be dining alone, is ordering $70 and $75 bottles of red wine here in Australia. Those sorts of examples are impossible to justify in my view.
Mr. Bignell and his advisor spent more in 10 days than many people in his southern electorate of Mawson struggle to take home in a year. Could your local Member of Parliament be called Leon Bignell?
Yes.
Yeah, Leon Bignell, yeah.
Do you know what portfolio he is? Do you know what minister he has? He's the Minister for Tourism.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Have you heard of him?
No.
Have you ever met Leon Bignell?
No.
The former Olympic Stadium, Sydney. Last year, Mr. Bignell flew to Sydney. The documents show at our expense. A limousine picked him up, drove him to his hotel at the Rocks, then to Olympic Park for him to watch the Rabbitohs play the Bulldogs in the NRL Grand Final. Major events, the Minister told Today Tonight, are a valuable networking opportunity. And he says he explored bringing the NRL to Adelaide. And then the limousine drove him back to his Shangri-La hotel and eventually to the airport. On that weekend, we spent $700 on his limousine service.
When you look at the invoice, the limo was actually paid to wait for the hour and a half or so whilst the minister attended the NRL Grand Final. That's the sort of excessive expenditure that, again, taxpayers are going to be very angry about.
Would you rather he spent that money in your electorate?
Oh, definitely. Definitely.
What would you like to see him spend the money on?
More houses. People live in... There's a lot of people that live in their cars at the moment.
Fancy going to the Australian Open at our expense? Business class, of course, the total $1,800, more than the average weekly earnings in South Australia. Would you rather see that sort of money spent bringing tourists to South Australia?
Oh, yeah, well, that's the main thing now, isn't it? There's nothing else here. All of them and what's the engineering mobs and everything, if they're all gone, the mining boom is out of the question at the moment.
The cuts that have occurred in a number of the areas of the tourism budget could have been minimised if some of this money had been spent in that area rather than on the minister's travels.
In August, he went to the USA to further his understanding of the American food and wine market. While there, he went to the Staples Center and watched the Los Angeles Sparks defeat the Seattle Storm in the WNBA. And on to the AT&T Major Baseball Stadium in San Francisco, home to the San Francisco Giants. On a separate $38,000 US trip with Kerry Trule this year, their Dallas restaurant choice had won 9 Best Chef Awards for Paul Key, a TV celeb. and his name's on a credit card bill that you paid. Could that be in the electorate of Mawson, that bar?
No.
When's the last time you had a meal in a restaurant like this?
Makes you hungry looking at it.
2013, he had time to attend an international cricket event in London, where the Ashes happened to be playing.
There it is!
He toured Wembley Stadium. In Vienna, he watched the Tour of Austria. In France, the Tour de France, not his first visit. So, where has he been, the Minister for Tourism, Agriculture, Sport and Wine?
Glasgow.
Frankfurt am Main.
London.
Edinburgh.
Napa Valley. Austin.
Hollywood.
Dallas.
Melbourne.
Paris.
Los Angeles.
Lausanne.
Zürich.
Sydney.
Beijing. Helsinki.
Espoo. Bern.
Shanghai.
济南 Guangzhou 吉隆坡
Rotterdam.
Bruxelles.
Tuusula.
Ulster.
And when he bought chocolates at Hague's, he sent us the $73 bill.
Isn't he lucky?
Presumably a gift to some prospective visitor.
Money is tight in South Australia. It's really quite important to be transparent and understand what the benefits are of a spend. The results are down, so should we be actually getting a step back, as I've said, have a look and say, is this money being spent the right way? All of it.
So obviously this is not your final destination?
No.
Where are you going to from here, if I may ask?
Around the world.
So the Minister declined to be interviewed but informed us these travels were part of his official duties and that purchasing wines on his and his advisor's government-issued credit card is a prudent way of spending taxpayers' money if it's a part of official duties.